Welcome to the High Agency Podcast with your host, Noah Revoys.
Hello, I'm here today with King David, the world's only stop porn strategist, anti-porn strategist, and we're going to talk about something which affects millions of relationships around the world. That is the misunderstanding between men and women over emotions. Men and women process emotions differently, and a lack of understanding of how the opposite sex processes emotions leads many to have misunderstandings, even alienation of affection, and it creates a barrier of understanding between men and women. And this is something that both David and myself have seen in our coaching practices, and perhaps also in our friend groups as well. And we're going to talk about what men can do to what they can take responsibility for, what they don't have responsibility for, and there will be tips as well for both men and women on how to improve the communication and management of emotions within relationships. Thank you for joining us today, David. It's a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on. Can't wait to see where the conversation goes.
Yeah, this started from a private conversation between you and I, and you suggested to make a video about it, and I think it was a great idea. You had some really good questions that you brought up before. Would you like to open with one, please?
Yeah, so the first one I have, and this is a little bit more lighthearted, but what advice do you have for men to stop a nagging wife?
Yeah, so the nagging wife, you can't control her. You can't force her to do or not do something. What you can do is completely control yourself and put boundaries on what you will tolerate. And so if you have a nagging wife, there's two things you need to do. First, you need to ask yourself, is she actually asking something legitimate? She might be asking for something that is an actual legitimate need and just doing it in a very irritating way because she doesn't know better. If that's the case, solve the problem, acknowledge to her, yes, that is a problem. And you're right, it is my responsibility. And then tell her when you're going to have it solved by. So saying to her, I will fix that thing one day, maybe in the future, is not going to make her calm down. If you say, you know what, I have some time this weekend. I'm going to take a couple hours. I'm going to fix that thing for you. Okay. But here's the deal. You don't mention this again. I'm going to go fix it. You don't mention it again. Deal? And you make a deal with her. And you say, you don't bother me about it. I'm going to go fix it. Sometimes women do notice things around the house that we as men would ignore. We're pretty comfortable living like cavemen. And that's great. I mean, men can live with tremendous discomfort. Women, though, they're thinking not just of their needs, but of the needs of children, perhaps in the family. And so I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, the hot water heater broke at my house, and it's summertime, and I'm like, screw it, who cares? I'm gonna take cold showers. It was a while because everyone was on holidays. It took a little while to get someone, about a week, to get someone in to replace it. And during that time, I had zero problems with it. It didn't bother me any, but I forget, I don't forget, but I have two small children. And so every time my wife gave them a bath, she's having to boil water and go through this whole long process. Now, imagine if I was, I'll get around to phoning somebody. And it took me weeks to do that. It would be very legitimate for her to complain that this isn't good for the kids. This is adding a lot of burden to me. If she did it in a nagging way, that would be irritating and that would be less likely to get cooperation. But she did voice a legitimate need. And I think for men, we need to separate out our woman's emotions from what is actually needed. And sometimes that means that she's nagging for no reason. And sometimes she is nagging for a reason. And don't let the nagging influence whether you deal with the thing that's your responsibility or not. If it's your responsibility, deal with it. Now, on the other hand, if you're being nagged constantly for no reason, it's a shit test. It's being done because she's concerned about your ability to deal with difficult people. The kind of men that don't get nagged are the kind of men whose wives understand that they have no problem dealing with aggressive, irritating people in the real world. My wife sees me boxing with my friends. She sees me leading people. She sees me dealing with interpersonal problems with a bunch of really, hard, tough guys that are in my group. And what happens is she knows that I can be really disagreeable. She doesn't need to nag me to test my ability to defend myself verbally. She doesn't need to do that. And so she doesn't, because I'm not giving her any reason to do it. And that's the other reason that women are nagging, is because they're afraid you might be weak, and they just want to see, are you weak? And the weak ways that you respond is by exploding. You lose control, or you do nothing. Worse is do nothing. You just take it and you just bow your head and say, yes, dear, whatever. Because she knows if she can push you around, anybody can push you around. And so you don't want to send that message to her. It's a great question, David.
Yeah, thank you. So along the same lines of how to stop a nagging wife, what advice do you have for men so they can differentiate? Or to help them to figure, okay, is this a shit test, or is there a legitimate need that I need to address?
Yeah, one of the things that a lot of nagging is very vague. And if you ask her to, okay, come here, dear, and physical touch is very, very important. Come here, bring her close to you, put your hands on her in a gentle way, of course. Put your hands on her and say, what's bothering you? Tell me. And look at her and like you're really focusing and concentrating on her, what's wrong? And if she's vague about it, make her explain, do you want me to do something about this? Because sometimes they're just venting. It's not really nagging. That's just kind of venting. It can get confused for nagging, but they're just venting. Oh my! It's often with their parents. Oh, your in-laws. Oh, my mom's. You do this, and then my dad does that, and long-term parental problems that exist through almost every family. They don't want you to do anything about that because that's their family. They don't want you getting in the middle of it unless they ask you, and they just want to vent a little bit. Can be the same if she's working, can even be the same with the kids. The kids are irritating them. The kids are behaving badly. They don't necessarily want you to do anything about it. They just need someone to tell, and you're there and you're the someone. That's pretty legitimate, but you got to get them to be clear in their communication. I think a lot of people need to be trained how to speak or how to communicate, not how to speak. They know how to speak. They don't know how to communicate. Right. And I'm always telling my wife, what is it that you want? What is it that you want? And then now she knows I'm going to ask that. So she thinks about what she wants before she comes to talk to me. So we don't have a half-hour discovery process to get to the point, because she'll come to me with the point in mind. And get her to be specific. You want this thing fixed. Is there a time limit? Does it need to be done by a certain time? There's this famous thing of, after something goes wrong, somebody saying, well, I told you that, and I warned you about this, and I told you about all these things, and they only thought about them in their head, never actually said anything. They never really communicated what they want, and they figured you could read their mind. And you can't let women get away with that. Men do that sometimes too, but women are notorious for that, partially because we are pretty good at reading each other's mind. But that still causes a tremendous amount of interpersonal conflict in groups of women, is that mind reading and doing it poorly. So don't let her put you in that position where you have to read her mind, and remind her gently, I'm not a mind reader. I'm sorry, I don't understand what you want. I'm not playing dumb. I really don't understand what you want. What do you want me to do? And usually when a woman comes to you with the specifics, they want the problem solved. They don't need to tell you how to solve it. That's not what I'm suggesting. What they need to say is, I have this problem and I need it solved, and it needs to be solved soon. And then you can start to make a plan, and it really helps to calm them down if you tell them when it'll be solved by. Yeah, this will be solved this weekend. Don't worry. I'll drill those holes in the wall for your pictures this weekend. Don't worry. And just give her that. And now the thing is if you don't follow through on it, you can miss occasionally, and if you have a good reason. But if you don't follow through on it, then the nagging goes, she becomes nervous because you're not reliable. And then the nagging goes out of control. And that's usually relationships with a ton of bad nagging. It's because the man has consistently not followed through. Now, you're not responsible for the anxiety that causes her, but you are responsible for your own lack of follow through. You are responsible for breaking trust. And, people think breaking trust in a relationship's all about, fidelity, sexual fidelity. That's only one aspect of it. It's keeping your word on everything.
Right. Yeah, no, and that the point you had made there, that actually segues well into the next question I have, which is, so what is a man supposed to do when he makes a mistake in the relationship that he then corrects quickly, yet still has an upsetting impact on his wife? So what is a man supposed to do when he makes a mistake, corrects it, but the mistake still upsets his wife and she's just not having it, not in a good mood, those kinds of things?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that once you get used to it, this will happen automatically. But as a man, you have to deal with it internally. You have to be pretty okay with your wife and kids having moods, because that's just what they do. And you can't let it, it's got to be like water off a duck's back. It doesn't bother you that much. That is not a lack of empathy. It's actually a lack of empathy to absorb all of your wife and children's moods. And, they break down, you break down too. Then who in the family is going to be strong? That's not empathy. Empathy is saying, I know that you're not feeling well, or you've got this mood, or this unhappiness right now. I'm not going to share in it. I'm not going to let it affect me, because I have to lead and I have to take care of you guys. But yeah, women have a right to their emotions. You just don't have to share them, and you don't have to make them your problem. It's perfectly fine to say, yeah, I understand how you're feeling. That's reasonable, or maybe it's not. I understand how you're feeling, and yeah, I hope you feel better soon about it. And not really do much. You fix the problem. You don't have to fix her emotions. That's not your job. You might give her a hug. You might comfort her a bit, but you have to be careful not to coddle her, not to undermine her agency. It's her job to get control of her own emotions. Yes, you can help her with that. But if you treat her like a child, she will remain like a child. And a lot of women end up like children because everybody treats them like a child. Not in particular their husband. They just get treated like that all the time. And often the better looking the woman, the more likely this is to happen, because she can get away with more. And we just tend to not ascribe to women any ability at all to control their emotions. And that's not healthy for them. Let them have those emotions. Let them feel them. Let them rush over them. One of the things that men often don't understand is, like, we'll tend to say good and bad emotions. Oh, this is a good emotion. This is a bad emotion. And men's brains are structured differently. And this is one of the keys to understanding the differences between men and women. So a man's brain is like a warehouse, and there's boxes up on shelves, and each box has an emotion. And we go into, or a memory or a thought or an idea, and we'll go in and we'll take out anger box, and we'll sit down anger box, and we'll pull all of our anger out. And we're just angry. That's all we are at that moment. We're just 100% angry. And this allows us to have a laser-like focus and accomplish things. We can go real deep, real fast on things because we have that laser-like focus. And when we're done anger, we put it back in the box and it's gone. And it doesn't affect tomorrow. The anger's gone. It's like stored away somewhere until we need it again. Women, it's a little different. Their mind is like a kiddie pool, and it's full of balls, and each ball is an emotion, and they're swimming in that. They're swimming in the emotions, and they're all bumping up against them at the same time. And you ask a guy, how do you feel? And he'll say, angry or sad. You ask a woman how she feels, it's like angry and sad and happy and hungry and horny, and like she's gonna go through like 30 different emotions at once.
Right.
And okay, you feel all of those, but which one do you feel the most? Well, I don't know. It's one of these 5, and they'll name 5 that is like, currently in top place. And this is just how they are. This is different. And for men, we look at that and we say, oh, that's so chaotic. How can you live like that? They actually aren't happy if they're not currently having an emotion. Men can actually be with no emotions. We can put all the boxes away and just do something. Like, I don't have an emotion while I'm exercising. I'm just focusing on, not hurting myself and finishing my reps and all of that. I don't have an emotion. I'm just there doing it like a machine. But women, they have to have an emotion associated with things generally, because that's how they motivate themselves. Sometimes 3 or 4 emotions, and sometimes their emotions conflict. So they can be, it's what people talk about, makeup sex. So she can still be angry at you, and she can be super attracted to you, especially for the fact that she's angry at you because you just basically didn't take her shit, and now she likes that because that means you're strong. And so she'll have like this mix of emotions, and it's not a bad thing. And as men, we have to just let them have those emotions. We don't have to fix them. That is how they are supposed to be.
Right.
We're not responsible for that. That's how they were created. And just let them enjoy it. Let them have those emotions. Let them, I think it's very hard for women that don't cry. I've had a number of clients, usually with the most traumatic backgrounds, they can't cry. And they're unable, because they can't cry, they're unable to have that emotional release. And women, they need to cry. Men's emotional release is we go out and we do something in the world. Women, they have a cry. And that usually calms them down. They feel good about it. And as men, we want to be like, oh, don't cry. Stop crying. It's okay. They need to do it. Let them do the crying. Sometimes we got to hold them while they cry or whatever, but let them do it. And then they'll be fine afterwards. And stop trying to fix them, and stop trying to make them into men and denying them their emotions. That's just part of who they are.
Right. So do you have any advice for men to go from problem solver to either listener or, okay, I will let you wallow through this, have fun? Because there are some instances where it is good for the man to just be hands off and, okay, I'll let you have your time and space right now.
Yeah. And what this is going to be different, a little bit different for different women. There are women that cry. I know women that are totally stable. Everything is good in their life. They cry a little bit every day. And they're not actually sad. Sometimes they like cry for happiness. They'll just get emotional a couple of times a day, that they're really happy the rest of the time. They are just highly emotional. Their emotional energy levels are very high. Those tend to be productive women. They get a lot done because they also are super happy. So that's the thing too, that I talk to a lot of guys and I'm like, are you ever happy? And they're like, well, I vary between angry and angry and what was it? Angry and horny. Yes. Men vary in between angry and horny. And it's like, we bring women into our life and we get to go on that roller coaster with them. We get to be super happy. We get to see, people are saying it's biology. Yeah, it's hormones. That is a lot of it. It's hormones, but that up and down will happen in the same day. So that's not the monthly cycle. It may still be hormones. One of the things that stabilizes men's brains is testosterone. And the higher the man's testosterone, the more stable his emotions. There's a lie that, guys on steroids have crazy, raging, angry emotions. It's not the steroids. It's the fact that they're often on a bunch of uppers as well. Like there was a lot of bodybuilders on high levels of testosterone and cocaine. It's not the testosterone that made them upset. It was the cocaine, because I'm sure that gave them lots of energy in the gym, but it also set them off. A lot of them were on other kinds of painkillers and antidepressants and all kinds of stuff. But testosterone calms you down. Even for women with more testosterone tend to have more even emotions. It just evens out your emotions. But women have about a tenth, varies, but about a tenth the testosterone of a healthy man, which means they have a tenth of that emotional regulating hormone, which means all throughout the day, their hormones can go up and down. Yes, one of the viewers says, yeah, she sees a television show with a beautiful moment, and just not sadness. She's crying for kind of a happiness, the emotional energy gets heightened to a point where it needs to bleed off, and that's how she does it. Women will bleed it off through some crying. Or some women I know, they'll sing as well. Sometimes they'll vary between crying and singing, and they'll just bleed their emotional energy off that way, or dance around the house, whatever. And if you're a man, you can find it annoying, or you can just enjoy it, because actually it's kind of beautiful, and it's very feminine, and it's something we just don't do and don't get out of male friendships, is to see that kind of emotional expression. It's very much like watching children. Children are hyper emotional as well, because their emotional regulation is lower. Even if they're a boy, they have low testosterone because they're just little, and they'll go through that. They'll cry, and then they'll dance, and then they'll fall asleep suddenly. It's just the way it is. And women, everything about them is structured to make them compatible with raising children. And so they're there with their emotional sensitivity so they can be sensitive to their children. A lot of times, the biggest concern that women have voiced to me about men they're going to marry is two things. One is lack of leadership, so lack of masculinity, essentially. The other is a lack of emotional perception. In other words, it's not that they want the man to be emotional, but they don't want him to be a robot. They want him to be able to get excited about things and to understand their emotional makeup. And they smile, they want to be smiled back. They don't want to be dealing with, like, I don't know, a Vulcan all the time. They want to deal with an actual human who has emotions. And that is that's hard, I think, for a lot of men to understand. They hear emotional and they misinterpret that as, you want me to cry. They actually want more than cry. They want you to laugh with them and enjoy life. I think women, in a lot of ways, enjoy life more than men, because they're looking at it from an almost childlike perspective of awe and wonderment. And if they're in a safe environment, if they have a safe, protective men around them, that's a really wonderful thing to watch women in that kind of environment. I have, I see my wife, I see my friends' wives, and it brings a smile to your face to see them enjoying themselves and playing with kids, and just, they're grown women, but they're kind of bouncing down the street in a happy, childlike way almost. And it's really a fantastic thing.
Right. Wholeheartedly agree. So along those lines, what advice do you have for men who find that maybe they're getting a little more annoyed at their wife's emotional display, be it of sadness, happiness, appreciation? So what can men do to start to appreciate that more? Is there any kind of reminder or thing they can tell themselves so it's not just, oh man, here she goes again, now I gotta wait for it, the highs and lows?
Yeah, there's usually two reasons for that. One, they might be spending too much time with her. This happens if during COVID, where people are working from home and they're spending all their time together, and they're not used to that. If you're used to it, it's not so bad. But if you're not used to it, it's difficult. Men should not, even married men should not spend all their time with women. Women are compatible with us, but they have contrary emotional systems of regulation. And if we spend too much time around them, it either annoys us or we start picking up their feminine traits. And I think for most men end up picking up the traits, but it can annoy us as well. And the thing you do is get outside, get some sunlight, go to the gym, get together with some friends, punch each other, whatever, get some gloves and box, do something really manly, so that when you come home, that is a refreshing contrast rather than, oh, not this again. That's a big part of it. If you're not getting out with guys, then women start to become more and more irritating to you. And it's just because you're getting overwhelmed with too much estrogen in your environment. You need to go out and get some testosterone environment. The other thing is that you need to remind yourself that she has a right to her emotions, just the right way that you have a right to your stoicism. She can't demand that you cry with her every time she cries and that you adopt her emotional perspective the same way you can't demand that she adopts your emotional perspective. You're each going to do things according to your genetic, biological imperatives. And, letting her have that space, that's extremely important.
Right. Okay. So I have a question pertaining to men that are struggling to overcome vices. In my mind, I'm asking this obviously from a place of men that are quitting porn, but it really can be for anything. So the question I have for you is, what is a man who's struggling to overcome a vice supposed to do when his wife is discouraged with the progress he's making, and that discouragement makes it harder for him to either fight against the vice, to quit, or maintain the upward momentum?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, and this is not real life, but ideally, what your wife thinks about your progress or not shouldn't have anything to do with your progress. But that's only theoretical.
Right.
If you love your wife, you're going to be heavily influenced by what she thinks. And if you're pair bonded, that's the one and only woman in your life. She's going to have an influence on you. And if she's disappointed in you, that's going to hit your ego. And there's literally nothing that you can do things to minimize that, but it's going to be there. And I think open and frank conversation about this is what's going to help. The woman needs to see, for a lot of women, they believe that pornography is cheating, the same as adultery. Now, I don't think any religion or legal system considers it the same thing, but for a lot of women, they feel it's the same level of severity.
Right.
As to how it impacts them. And like I said before, women have a right to their feelings. And if you get into a marriage where, you're, especially if you're, say, a Christian, and pornography is not part of the deal when you got into that marriage, you have broken trust. Now you have to reestablish the trust. And to a large extent, that's a matter of you demonstrating to her, and it's demonstrating, not saying, oh yeah, I'm making progress, demonstrating progress. And then communicating that with her. Now, the reality is there are women who will hold things against you forever. That's actually a tendency of women, is to hold things you've done against them or done that they don't like against you forever. And I know men that told me about, they told their wife about something they did that was annoying to a previous girlfriend, and she held that against them, even though it had never been done to them. And so you have to be careful what you tell her. Don't tell her things she doesn't need to know. And this is not a matter of keeping secrets or hiding things. It's a matter of managing what stressors you put on her. Now, I'm not saying don't be honest about your porn use, but you don't have to give her the play-by-play every minute of everything you're doing. You do have to establish trust again. And you have to see, if you can't reestablish trust because she's incapable of trusting again, you have no control over that. The relationship may be broken. And if she's unwilling to cultivate trust, because that's something she has to choose in her heart, I am going to accept my husband's outreach and allow the trust to rebuild, or not. And if she doesn't forgive, that's her choice. But as a man, you have to push her to be honest about that. Have you forgiven me? Yes. If you've forgiven me, you can't hold it against me as well. You can say, I don't forgive you. That's okay. But don't say you forgive me and then hold it against me. Help her to logically examine some of those emotions. If she's having an emotion that's in her, that's just for her, that has nothing to do with you, just let her have it out. But when it affects the relationship, especially if there's children involved, it's your job as a man to bring order to the chaos. And so you're going to help her think through this, and you're going to help her ask her questions like, do you think that this is a fair standard to apply? And that is the kind of thing you want to do to stimulate in her the reasoning, because a lot of times, most people, men and women, make almost all their decisions emotionally. And if you help the woman to be more rational, she'll very often stop with the nagging, and she'll realize that undermining you is actually making it more difficult for you to stick with your self-improvement, your anti-porn treatments, for example.
Right. So along those lines, What advice, or no, actually, do you want to answer that
Sorry,
question?
just a second. I'm going to answer this question. Do you think the women who have heard, I think this is who have been hurt, would rather fight for a winner than settle for a loser? Yes, yes. This is part of it too. Is that they see the porn. This is why I think women are so viscerally disgusted by the man that looks at porn. And I don't mean like he looked at it once, but looks at it and then ends up letting it break him. Is that women are turned off by weakness. They're more turned off by weakness than cheating. Really. Although cheating is often a display of a man's moral weakness. Or I could say maybe always it's a display of his moral weakness. But women are turned off by the weakness. It's also a fact that they can't trust you, because very few men look at porn and immediately, when asked about it, go, yeah, I was doing that, and are totally honest. Usually there's a whole load of lies that goes along with it, because there's a lot of shame and they're covering up for that shame. And all of that needs to be addressed to rebuild the trust. It is for a lot of women, once that trust is broken, they choose to not let it get rebuilt. And that's something you have to look at in your marriage. If she's not going to let the trust be rebuilt and you don't have kids yet, you're going to have to make some hard decisions, because you can't be married and have children with someone who will not let you rebuild trust.
Right. I agree. And I think one of the most important things that you said with all that was the fact that despite women enjoy talking, processing things verbally, you coming to her and saying, hey, I'm making progress, and explaining that verbally is not going to be nearly as impactful if your actions are the things that are communicating that you're making progress. So for any men listening, if you're struggling with things and you're telling your wife or your woman that you're making progress, it's going to be more impactful and beneficial for the relationship if your actions communicate that you're making progress. Now, if you're wondering, oh, well, what actions do I need to do that communicate that? Well, then you have to stick to the plan. Keep making the right decisions. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it comes down to taking action.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you said to someone, oh yeah, I'm going to lose some weight, and they're like, oh, that's great. That's great. And every day you're like, yeah, I'm really working hard on it. And here you are continuing to gain weight. It's not, the person's going to obviously distrust the fact that you're actually making progress, because you're clearly continuing to gain weight. So if you're a man and, you're the expert at knowing what that looks like, that progress looks like. One of the things that you can do, if you say you're having a porn problem and you're serious about dealing with it, is go and get a coach that's an expert at this. I am an amazing coach, but I'm not an expert at this. I would definitely say go to David if that's your problem. If you're having a struggle with pornography, go to David. Don't go to me. For a lot of other things, I can help you, but he really knows what he's doing on that subject. And what would be some of the ways that a man could demonstrate? Because a lot of times with women, they don't like to talk. They want to see things happen. They like to talk. They don't want to see the talk, though. They want you to demonstrate. What are some of the options or ways that a man could demonstrate that he's improving?
One of the ways that one of the easiest ways for a man to communicate through action that he's improving and making progress away from porn is partially going to come down to he's having more sex with her. It's more aroused by her, pursuing her more sexually, initiating in sex more. Because oftentimes one thing that you see with porn addicts is you're turning to porn in avoidance of something else. And it's always going to be easier to go load up a porn website and look up your favorite porn star, as opposed to initiating with your wife, or if there's something emotional in the way that you have to diffuse before you can get to the point of having sex or having makeup sex like we had talked about prior. That will, because unfortunately, whether you're turning to porn for a sexual reason or not, the outlet itself is sexual. So if you're turning to it, you'll have less desire for her. So an easy way to communicate you're making progress is you guys are going to Pound Town every night, or you're having more sex than you were prior. Um, because ultimately the progress that you're going to see away from porn is in subtle ways. So the man will have more confidence, he'll have more energy, so he'll naturally be more involved in those relationships. He'll be taking more initiative. He won't be as like if he gets stressed out, he's not going to, you know, seclude into himself. He's going to, okay, this is happening, I need to do something about it. Because ultimately that's what I like to teach guys inside of my coaching is there is a problem, you're feeling a certain way, and you need to take action in a healthy way to overcome it. So that almost always involves doing something. Of course, I teach mental frameworks and whatnot, but for men, especially to communicate that to your woman, it comes down to taking action. And she'll notice it more intuitively because it's not like, yeah, you can't just say, hey, I'm doing great. She will know when you're doing great because, like I said, you'll have more energy, more confidence, you'll be more present, those kinds of things.
Yeah, and it's an interesting side effect is that so if the only place that you can get your sexual attention is on your wife, that also requires that you start pushing for any emotional problems between the two of you, any things that you're not getting along, if there's not enough sexual dimorphism, if you're not masculine enough and she's not feminine enough, you're going to start pushing for those things to get resolved. And women are notoriously, most women are notoriously inert. They don't tend to push for the resolution of problems. That's kind of a disagreeable manly thing to do, to go, okay, there's a problem, let's get this dealt with, let's resolve this. And if you can't turn to, say, porn, and I would say this also is the same for men that have cheated, if you can't look outside the marriage to get your solution, your problem, you have to start working them out. Now, of course, you're not responsible for her behavior, so you can't make her cooperate in that process. But now you have a chance to say, I'm making this progress and this is what I'm doing to do it. Now you need to cooperate with me. And I've seen many, many cases where men have to go to the wife and say, okay, you need to cooperate, and this is what I need from you, and spell it out like a point bullet form of what needs to be changed. And that is very difficult for most modern women to understand, because they've been told that they don't have to listen to any man, least of all their husband. But if they want to continue to have a happy relationship, and if they want to encourage the man to resolve problems, then they have to cooperate. It's not possible to make a relationship with two people going in opposite directions. You have to kind of follow along the same basic pathway. And at some point she has to start to follow the lead.
Right. Well, because that was one thing that I had to have one of my clients do the other day was, because he came to me, told me that he's making progress, but his wife asked about the progress and she wasn't pleased with it. And so her displeasure in that discouraged him. And one of the things that I had to encourage him to do was, hey, look, you need to openly communicate with her that it hurts you, and yeah. I think that's one thing that us men, we have to keep in mind in relationships, despite not always wanting to communicate or show that level of vulnerability. There are just sometimes the other party is not aware that what they're doing or saying does have an impact. So, you do have to be prepared to have those hard conversations and go out and say, hey, this hurts. And that segues into the next question I have for you is, and this can be for both men and women, but it comes down to communicating. So what's the best way to communicate to your partner that something they're saying or doing is hurting them and discouraging them about the progress they're making in life without that coming off as an attack? Because one thing that happens, is people get defensive. Well, I don't mean to blah, blah, blah. And that creates a host of other problems. So what advice do you have to encourage that healthy communication?
So the first thing to remember, and this is a frame issue, is that if you're a man, you must always communicate as a man. Even if you're not communicating the same way you would man to man, you still have to speak like a man, and don't adopt feminine speaking systems. Don't talk like a woman, and vice versa. If you're a woman, talk like a woman. So for men, if they're wanting to communicate this, that they, something is not right in the relationship and it needs to be fixed, start with praise, because that's just generally, that's not particularly man or woman, but start with something positive and use physical touch a lot in your communication. When you, especially if she really trusts you, if your relationship is generally good and you're just working out some issues, and I would say even if it's not good, the more physical touch you have, the better it gets. Put your arm around her, touch her, physically touch her, get close to her, sit beside her and be really up against her and talk to her. I find it's better not to talk face to face. When you talk face to face with someone, it's almost like you versus me. When you sit beside someone and you put your arm around them, it could be, I do this with my kid, sit beside my kid, put my arm around him and start to talk to him. Now we're on the same team facing the world. And that actually makes a big difference in how people perceive the rest of the conversation. Now, if you're a man, you must speak because you love your wife. You're going to speak lovingly, but you must be fairly blunt, because beating around the bush is not a masculine thing. And she's not going to take you seriously. In fact, even if you're very direct, sometimes you have to repeat yourself for her to take you seriously. The reason is society's used to not really caring about how men feel or what men need. And so when men want to get what they need to be really clear about it. They almost need to take what they need and then, apologize later type thing. And so you need to be very clear. This situation must end. And this is how it must end. And you keep a calm frame while you're doing it. There's a certain phrasing for it where you are clear on what you want, and you are clear that you are setting a boundary for what you will tolerate. It doesn't work for most women to tell them what to do. What works is to say, I personally, as the husband, I will not tolerate X, Y, and Z anymore. This needs to change. Okay, and leave it up to her to figure out what you're going to do afterwards. Hopefully you never get into the I'm going to have to do this now situation, because you don't want to make threats and ultimatums. That means the relationship's over, basically. If you're a woman, you want to have a more feminine approach, which means you talk about, generally men are eager to please women, especially if they love them, and they're eager to figure out what the woman wants. And so if you say, I need X, Y, and Z, then you're going to get a pretty good response. If you tell a man, go clean the gutters, I got a 7-year-old son. You can't even tell him what to do. You got to recruit him onto your side and convince him. Because if you tell him what to do, I could tell him to eat a chocolate bar and he'd be like, no, I'm not going to do what you say. I'm going to do what I want.
Right.
Because he's a disagreeable little man, and I'm not going to discourage that disagreeableness. Too many people are so eager to do whatever the heck they're told. We shouldn't be encouraging too much of that in society. Now, on the other hand, if I say, hey, would you like to help me with this thing? I got a chocolate bar that needs eating. Can you help me? Then he's all over it, because I haven't insulted his sovereignty and individuality by treating him like an animal and bossing him around. And men hate that. Now, the other thing with women is there's two parts to it. There's the asking for what you need, and then there's showing gratitude once you get it. So some women are pretty good at asking for what they need and lousy at showing gratitude. So at first they start getting what they need, and then the marriage goes on a bit, and then suddenly they're not getting it anymore, and they're not sure why. And the problem is they failed to show gratitude for times in the past in which the man has very often, without saying a word, sacrificed things that he wanted in order to provide her with what she wants. And he never got the gratitude that he was owed, frankly. And now he doesn't want to do it anymore. And now she's ruined his desire to help. And so that gratitude is very important. And if you have got to an impasse in the relationship, don't ask for big things. Ask for very, very small things that don't have any sensitivity to them, and then show some gratitude and start rebuilding that trust that you're going to have what you do reciprocated. The reality is if you have children, the man does a lot more for the woman than the woman does for the man, and the woman does a lot more for the children. That's where all the energy goes. The energy goes from the man to the woman and then to the children. That's how it should be. And if you're doing that as a man, that means you're giving out tons of energy that you could do something else with. You could go have fun with this energy and this time and this money that you're spending on this family. And all that you're asking is gratitude. That's generally all a man wants back is gratitude. The other things are not tit for tat, having attention and affection and sex. That's not a trade. It's not like you're buying sex from your wife. That's something completely different. But for all the things you do for them, having that gratitude, that is your payment as a man very often. Also, eventually you have a legacy, and, when you're old, your children will look after you. But in the meantime, it's gratitude that is payment. And that's extremely important. You can do this with a stranger. You can build a rapport very quickly with a stranger by asking them for something. I'm a real expert at cold approaching random people and striking up friendships. And I'll be like, which way is it to the park or whatever? I'll ask them some question. I'll ask them to do something small for me, like, could you point out where the police station is? And it's sometimes nothing I need. I'm doing it as a way they do some small thing for me, then show gratitude for them for what they've done for helping me. And immediately you have a rapport with this person. You've had a reciprocal exchange with them. And that's what you need to start, couples need to start building back in the relationship. If they're at an impasse, they've lost that reciprocal exchanges. You'll often find both the man and the woman feeling like they gave more and got nothing in return. And that sounds, how is that possible, right? You're both giving more and getting nothing. That could be completely possible. You're giving things that the other person doesn't value, so they're not getting anything out of it.
Right.
And they're doing the same. And so neither of you are benefiting from this relationship in the way that you should. Start on little things that you can reciprocate. Start communicating and start bit by bit working your way back up. And if it took you a few years to get where you are, don't expect it to get better in a few weeks. That's the one other thing about women and time. They perceive small amounts of time as being very long. And as a man, you have to help them to develop that patience. Yeah, it took us a while to get here. It's going to take us a while to get out. This is a serious problem. It's going to take me a while to get better. It's going to take me a while to deal with this. I have a few friends that are contractors, and their wife will want them to renovate the kitchen. And she's like, "Can you do it tomorrow?" And the guys are like, "Dear, I'm booked up for like a year. I don't have time." "Oh, it's not a big deal. It's just a little job." And he's like, No, you don't understand. This is like 200 hours of work, and it's going to require an entire team. Right. Yeah, but could you just fit it in between your other things? And you just have to be firm about that things take time. It's almost a childish view of time. I joked with my wife that it's a good thing that babies come out automatically. Otherwise, women would want them out in a month. So they come out when they come out. So it is just a different view of things. And we have to help our wives with this. And of course, there are women that don't need any of this. There are women that you can have a totally logical discussion with, just like a man, but that's 1 out of 1,000, 1 out of 100, maybe.
Right.
So probably if you're listening to this, you don't have a shot at a woman like that, because it isn't going to happen. And oftentimes those women have their own different issues as well, because they think more like men. They might have a bunch of issues where things in the feminine realm are more difficult for them. So you have to, you make your trades and you get what you get.
Right. Well, and then the guy too, you got to ask yourself, do you really want a logical woman? 9 times out of 10. You'd think so, but, and then even on that,
tell a woman, okay, look, we're going to have sex. And then 9 months later, a child's going to burst out of you. She's logical. She's going to go, that sounds like it hurts. I don't think I'm going to do
right.
that. That's a terrible idea. What's that going to do to my body? And the illogical woman's going to go, "Oh, babies." And she's just going to want to have babies, and she's not going to think about it. Like, women don't think about the pain of pregnancy until like they go into labor, and then 10 minutes later they're like, yeah, that really hurt, but it's like it's over, and so they don't care anymore. But if they were completely logical, they might make some really different decisions. It might be bad for the human race overall.
Right. Right. And I also like what you said, where you can have it happen where you're doing things and people are expressing appreciation, but because it's not the kind of appreciation that you need to feel loved, that you can give, and while you're getting, you don't feel like you're getting anything in return. And then the easy fix there is just ask your spouse or your person, like, hey, what makes you feel the most appreciated for the things that you're doing, the things that you do that communicate that you love me. It's just ask that question and then answer accordingly. Because, like we talked about a little bit prior, nobody's a mind reader. While women they're more intuitive and they can get a pick up on those things, at the end of the day, having an honest conversation beats intuition 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, women get vibes. They understand your vibe. You're like, you're angry or you're sad or you're happy or whatever, or you're pleased or displeased. But that's a far different thing from like specifics and facts and information. I've had a lot of clients, couples clients, and usually it's the man that contacts me. I would say about 80% of the time, and he'll start off with telling me the things that he's currently unhappy with, because everyone goes to the doctor to talk about their pain, right? No one goes to the doctor to say how awesome they feel. So they treat me like a doctor, and they say, oh yeah, I got this pain and my wife does this and da 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 da. I'm like, oh great, that sounds absolutely terrible. You should divorce her right away. Like, why would you want to live with somebody like that? And this is like I'm playing devil's advocate. And then immediately they start to defend her, and then they tell me a whole bunch of really beautiful, good things about her and how much they love her. I mean, they wouldn't be coming to get help if they didn't love her, because they want to fix the relationship. But they'll tell me all these other things, and I'll say, have you ever told her the things that bother you? Yeah, I keep telling her over and over and over again the things she's doing wrong. Okay. Did you ever tell her about all the things that you just told me that you love about her? Well, no, not really. Okay, now do you see there's a problem there? You're willing to tell a random stranger, which is kind of what I am to them at that point, a random stranger, all these things you love about your wife, but you can't remember a time you told her those things? It's very easy for us as humans to complain. We seem to be programmed to complain. It's very hard for us to be truly grateful and tell people what it is that we appreciate about them. And I think it allows, or it perhaps puts us in a kind of vulnerable state where we realize how much we really like that person and how much we really need them to tell them what about them we like. And people get afraid to do that. But you can't have a relationship without some vulnerability. It's impossible. Anything, even a friendship, you have to have some vulnerability. And so go and tell her that. I've told guys lots of times, I said, take a look at this. I often record the sessions and give it to people so they can look at it after. And I say, go through this, make a note of all the good things you said about her. Make sure in the next week you tell her all of this before you see me again, and tell me how it went. And because there's no way in a week there's not a good time to talk to my wife. For an entire week, it's ridiculous. So no, they go and they'll say it. And often that actually is enough to fix things. If a woman or a man thinks that their partner's only displeased with them and that there's nothing that they like and there's nothing good about them, that hits that person's ego so hard that they lose all desire to continue to work on the relationship. And that's hard to recover from. You need to let your partner know what it is that you love and like about, not just love, what you like about them as well, what you appreciate. And it can be as much as like, yeah, I like your ass, all the way to, I really love how you when I need to have a nap in the afternoon, you're quiet, or I don't know what it is, some real minor thing as well. Let them know the things you like. Praise the things you want more of. To a large extent, you can at first ignore the things you don't want. Just praise the things you do want. And most people will try to do the thing they're praised for. If you're only using the stick and never the carrot, you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to create an antagonistic relationship where you're beating each other over the head with sticks instead of trying to feed each other carrots.
Yeah, no, communicating what you're appreciative of that someone does. Even just like you had said there, giving the compliments, acknowledging what they're doing. Sometimes it doesn't have to come down to what actions can you say, or even skipping the what do I need to do to know that you're appreciated by me. It can just come down to you just say it. I appreciate that you've done this.
Yes, that concept of appreciation. I mean, men thrive on that, but I think even women need it. Your children will rarely, like I've taught my kids to say thank you, and I don't just mean that perfunctory. Someone hands you something, you say thank you, but really go to their mother and say, well, the one that's older, he can speak more clearly, of course. The baby's not so much, but go to your mother, give her a hug, and say, I really appreciate you cleaning up and taking care of me and making food for me and my brothers. And, I love you very much. And go and say that every once in a while. Basically, I encourage them to do that at least once a day. It takes you 10, 15 seconds. And it puts my wife in a great mood for hours. Like, she's just on cloud nine after she hears that. But we all have a tendency to be like children and just complain about what we don't want. And that's something we can correct. We tend to do that to ourselves. We complain. We rarely ever in our own mind say, what do I like about myself? Usually we're all like, oh man, I suck at this thing. And I'm too fat. And I wish I made more money. And it's like loads of complaints about our life. So is it any wonder we also complain about other people? And I think the real start to fixing that is to start being more grateful about yourself and your own life and how well you're treating yourself and how well you take care of yourself. So that you then are in the habit of being grateful so that it's easier to do that with your partner.
Yeah, very much so. And then even on the, hand of complaining, one thing I like to do for myself and teach this to as many people as possible. If you are actively complaining and you're aware that you're complaining, then you also have full capability to take action to solve the problem that you're complaining about. Because part of complaining is the fact that we do it thinking that it's fixing something or solving some problem. But reality is we're just beating around the bush and it's not doing anything. It's the same metric of like saying, oh, I'm making progress, but you're not actually taking action that communicates that you're making progress. So if you have the time and energy to complain, then guess what? You've got the time and energy to take action and fix things.
Absolutely. And there is a difference between complaining and letting someone know that things need to be different. So marking your boundaries and letting a person know about a situation that needs to be changed is very different than complaining. And if you can't tell the difference, then you need to contact David or I and get some coaching, because your perceptions of things are a little messed up. And that's something that requires more than watching a YouTube video to figure out the difference. You probably have to actually get some examples in your life and figure out what's working and what's not. Well, this has been great, David. We've someone mentioned something interesting. Complaint is a forfeit of agency. Exactly.
Yeah.
You're saying fixing this problem is beyond my abilities and skills. Please, some higher power, save me. And that's fine for children, because that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to go, please, mom and dad, save me. I can't figure this out. That's not what adults should do. Yeah. Children complain, adults communicate. We communicate our needs. We let someone know our needs. We let someone know our boundaries. And we avoid complaining. Complaining is extremely undermining of a relationship's integrity. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, David. Where can people find you if they want to get more help from you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. My handle is @KingDavidTKA. That's capital K on the King, capital D on the David, capital T, capital K, capital A. And that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. Just send me a DM, have any questions. I do my best to get back to people as quickly as possible. Of course, my specialty as the world's only quit porn strategist is I'm going to help you quit porn and lay the groundwork to live your best life ever. Whether you are married, in a relationship, or single, or anything, I've got a way to help you, and I'm more than happy to make a way for it to work.
Yeah, David has a track record of success, and I've heard young men vouch for him and how effective it's been what he's been doing with them. So it's excellent, David, and we'll see you. Probably we'll have you on again. And I was on your channel once as well. People should go look that up. And on the comments, the description for this video, I also have a link to your Twitter. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day.
Thank you for watching our video, and I hope it inspired you to take action in your life. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video to get more agency building content. The real secret sauce is in our newsletter. Click on the link in the video description below to sign up. I promise I won't flood your inbox, and anything that we do send you will be of high value.